حامی اولی برنامه پادکست قصه شما بیننده و شنونده عزیز هستین. در لابلای از او پادکست امروزی از ما را کسته صرافی آزگان یا آزگان اکسچنج مقیم استرالیا اسپانسر شدن. ما وقتی که پول و همکارای ما در برنامه پادکست قصه میخوایم پول به فامیلا اخت پاکستان، افغانستان و یا دوبای کسته رای کنیم، از صرافی آزگان استفاده کنیم. خدمات آزگان قانونی است، سریع است و مطمئن است. یک از خوبیایی که صرافی آزگان در مقایسه با دیگر صرافی ها در اینجا است که چقدر سریع کار اجرا میشه و پولش مول تحویل میده. بخصوص در کشور مثل ایران اونجا محدودیت های حساب بانکی وجود داره، یک 2 روزی 3 روزی وقت میگیره تا دیگه صرافی ها پولش مول تحویل بده در ایران. اما صرافی آزگان پولش ما را در بین یک چند ساعت، یک 2 ساعت کسته، اما روز به روز میتونه در ایران تحویل بده. و خوبی دیگه صرافی آزگان است که تمام از این خدمات کسته میتونه از طریق تماس تلفنی انجام شده. اصلا لازم نیست که ما با دکان ازنا بریم.
Yeah, this is pretty much just whatever like it doesn't have to have like a hard start.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah. Cool. So I think thanks so much for coming, to our house, I guess. Normally we do this in the studio.
No, I love it. This is so comforting.
It's like very, homely, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm at a memoni or something,
Yeah, it is. It is a mini memoni. Sorry, I don't have like all the
Bodom and where is it?
You live in Footscray, right?
Yeah, in Footscray, which is good as well.
Did you grow up in Footscray?
No, I grew up in Frankston, like the Pines.
From Frankston to Footscray.
And my parents are now like on the Mornington Peninsula side.
Yeah.
So we're quite far from each other.
I think that's an interesting place to start is because you were telling me about that restaurant that you guys run in Mornington.
Yeah.
And I've actually passed that restaurant a couple of times and it was a bit surprising. I'm like an Afghan
What is this? Yeah.
In Mornington.
Yeah, exactly.
So were you born in Frankston and then you the whole time you pretty much spent there until you moved to Footscray?
Yeah, so I was born in Frankston.
Yeah.
We stayed in the Pines for like the longest time.
Yeah.
Obviously prior to me being born and everything.
Yeah.
And then sort of halfway through primary school we moved to Mornington because we moved the restaurant from Frankston to Mornington.
Right.
So that's why we made the move there. And then I moved to North Melbourne in the city just for work because it was easier.
Yeah.
And then Footscray.
When did your parents move to Australia?
It would have been, I think, in the 1980s.
80s.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of Afghans that came here around
that time. Yeah. The whole Frankston community, I think, was around that time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, originally family from Kabul or which part of Afghanistan?
Kabul, my dad, and my mum's from Faryab.
Faryab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she's got that Uzbek blood.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I can see a bit of a Uzbeki.
Everyone would talk to me in Uzbek. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying.
In Uzbekistan,
everyone, they just would go to a shop to buy something and they'd be talking to me. I was like, no, I can't understand you.
Yeah. You said Bukhara and that's where they speak Tajiki, so you would have understand.
I would have, but it's still different.
Yeah.
They're like, what kind of Tajik do you speak? Are you like Tajik Afghan? And I'm like, yeah. And so there's still that little bit of difference. You'll probably do much better than I did.
Yeah.
But it was still difficult because, it's a different like dialect almost.
Yeah. Yeah, and also because like you're born here, raised here, you obviously have limited opportunity to speak Farsi. So, hence why, and then another accent on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it really difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think the work that we do in Culture Spring, and it's funny because at the beginning for a few, so I think in the benefit of some of our audience, it would be just a bit of an introduction about Culture Spring is that multicultural organization called CMY, Center for Multicultural Youth.
Yeah.
We are part of, the youth-led unit, I guess. And I met you in the first couple of meetings. It was funny that I didn't even realize that you're Afghan.
I know.
Because you don't have your name isn't necessarily Farsi.
Martika.
Yeah. Where is it? Is it Farsi name or?
Well, Martika is the jewellery that we wear.
The one that they put on the forehead.
Yeah.
True.
So
Who chose that name?
I think it was my sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm the youngest of 4.
Yeah.
There's a 12-year difference between me and the next sibling. So it's
12 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they were all born
They were
overseas?
all from overseas.
Yeah.
I'm the only one born in Australia.
Right.
So you can imagine the difference of growing up.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So, having like much older siblings who are essentially more Afghan than you, I guess, like here.
Yeah.
Because they're not born here, I guess.
Yeah.
How was that like?
It was difficult, but it was really good at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it was like I had not just 2 parents. I also had my bibi, my grandma, so 3 parents. And then I had another 3 siblings who are all much older than me and would act like they're my parents as well. So I had all these people just on my case. So that was hard at times growing up. And just like going through high school and primary school and the things that I wanted to do or like the way I would socialize wasn't really... My brothers and stuff all had been through it so much earlier than I had. And then there was a big gap and then I come along and it's like my parents have to restart that thinking again and the way they bring me up. So that was difficult, but it was also... Having older siblings is so good because they get to speak to your parents at that level where I can't because I'm the youngest and I don't know what I'm talking about, you know. So they can speak to them on that level. And
so do you think they're able to connect with their parents in a different way to you?
Yeah, I think we definitely connect to my parents in a different way. It's really different. I think...
Is it the language or just the upbringing?
I mean, my siblings' Farsi isn't any better than mine. Like, I probably, at times, I think I do better. Because they were quite young when they came here as well. Like, they're in their prime teenage years, you know. And you're so shaped and influenced by your environment at that time that they adopted certain values as well, being here. I don't know if it's just language, but I think I've had the privilege and the luxury of connecting with my parents in a really more like... It's not like... I don't know how to explain it. It's like I can go out for them and just like go to a cafe and we can have that sort of connection and that time together, which I don't think is as common for my siblings. I think it's more like they have specific things to talk about or there's certain things that they have to do or how to help my parents. And I think the way I connect with them is just a bit more... Do you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Because I have a lot of siblings myself.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about it, I kind of envision myself with my siblings, and it's exactly the same. Like, we all have our own way of connecting with our parents.
Yeah.
And it's to do with, our personality as well, right? Like, everyone is different, right? So the way you connect, and then on top of that, you add the fact that, you have different, a little bit of a different upbringing because, you're born here, your parents, your siblings are all born overseas. So, I get it. So 3 brothers or sisters?
2 brothers and the eldest is my sister.
So a good mixture.
Yeah, exactly. Two and two. I think the other thing that helps as well is that they all have kids and I don't have kids, obviously.
Yeah.
So they have to connect with me. They can't connect through the kids. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So with my siblings, they want to see the kids before they want to see my siblings, you know? So
and
with me, there's no option.
Grandparents tend to like love their grandchildren more than their actual children. Yeah. It's interesting. I was telling you just before about tonight's episode that's going out on Qissa is Farnoz Shahimi, I believe, her last name. I hope I'm not getting the surname incorrect, but she did a PhD on Afghan youth that have migrated to Australia, children and young people, and how their identity has shaped over the years here in Australia, and what migration, but also trauma. And when I say trauma, I don't necessarily mean the experiences they would have gone through in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran, but also here in the Australian society, because there's racism and there is mistreatment that people go through here as well, and how that has shaped their identity and who they think they are or who they've become, I guess. So I thought this is so timely that we're talking about it, because you're as an Afghan who was born in Australia. What do you identify? Like, do you identify as Afghan or do you identify as Afghan-Australian? How do you see your identity?
It's so complicated, and it's taken me such a long time to realize who I am culturally. I think just with the things, I think growing up, there was such a strong sense of community because a lot of people had arrived around that age, and so we tried to stick together and you would do things for the community, and there'd be community events, and you just really have that strong connection with like all the other kids that you're growing up with at the same time. So when I was young, I had a really strong Afghan identity, and the other two things that really helped me through those years was my grandma, the only grandparent I ever knew, and she'd be the one taking care of me. And then secondly is the restaurant that the small business that my parents brought about, and how I absorbed everything that they put into that. And then going through high school, I was there, whatever. 9/11 happens, and then that shaped who we are. Like with headlines and whatever, and people make that part of your identity when you say you're from Afghanistan. That's just what they think of, or war or whatever. So you're working through that, and then I went to high school. University, whatever else. Grew up adolescent age. And then I eventually married someone who isn't Afghan. So that has its own complexities as well, and how you practice your culture. And then just until recently, people would always ask, even when I went to Uzbekistan recently on a family trip with my parents and my partner, the tour guide was like, "Oh, so do you think you're Afghan or do you think you're Australian?" And I just thought about it. At the time, I didn't really know what to say. And my dad's like, "Oh, she's confused. She doesn't know what she is." And it made me really angry. And I was like, "No, that's not how it is." And now, after reflecting on it, I'm like, I refuse to be put into a box of either being Afghan or either being Australian. I am both. And there's parts of me that identify more with my Afghan culture, and there's parts of me that identify with Australia. And that's just how it will always be.
And it should be like that. I think that's such a good point, because, and this is exactly one of the findings from Farnaz's PhD as well, where she goes like, and this is a bit different because the focus of her research is about those who are not necessarily born here. So it's a bit of a difference, but she exactly says that, the real assimilation, real integration is when you're comfortable with your actual identity, which you said you're both, you're Afghan and you're Australian. You can't be one or the other. Why do you have to be one or the other?
I think that in the Western society, people love to put labels on you, and people love to categorize you into a certain box, and I just refuse to accept that. And I can imagine one day, if I ever get to go to Afghanistan, there'll be parts of me that's just going to be thriving. But then there'll also be parts of me that is I feel like I don't really fit in here, or there's something missing, and that'll be the Australian side of me, So
you've never been to Afghanistan?
I was born here, and I've never been able to go.
So when Afghanistan, before the recent takeover by the Taliban, was that ever a consideration in the family to go visit, or did you?
My mum has never been, but my dad's been, I think, once or twice maybe. And my brother got to go back, but no one's ever really been back, and it's just because of that extended period of time of it still feels unsafe to go. I know there's people travelling in more so now, but I feel like I can't really go without my parents, and I need them to sort of take me there. So they're not really ready to go back yet for whatever reason. So I'm just hoping that in the next few years, hopefully that happens.
Bakhair. I was last time I was in Afghanistan was 2017, and I had been in Australia already for a number of years. So that was so different. For me to go back, and I feel and it felt so different. I can't even imagine how it would feel for you who's never been, But I think your recent experience in Uzbekistan give you a bit of that.
Oh, for sure. It was so interesting. It's that was the only country I've ever been to that sort of felt like Afghanistan to me, or what it could be. Obviously, it's very different, but at the same time, there's parts of it that are similar. It's the closest I've been able to get. And it's only just across the border, and people are like, why don't you just go? I'm like, it's not that easy. But yeah, there's definitely parts of it where I was just like, initially flying over the mountains and where like the snow-capped mountains are, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. The feeling that I had, it was just making me emotional just flying over that. And it wasn't even Afghanistan's mountains, it was probably Tajikistan or something. But still, you're like, there's something connecting you. And then we obviously got into Uzbekistan and whatever, and it's there's parts of places that speak Farsi. So my Farsi is broken, but I could still connect with them on that level. And that felt like unreal. And then you're going down the street and stopping the car to go and pick tut off the tree, and it's like, you know, this is it.
That's amazing.
And just
that's how I grew up. That's my childhood, pretty much. Just going to the you just climb up.
You just climb and you pick it. And,
it's crazy.
So it's like stuff like that that really connected me and made me feel like, there's parts of me that just love it, and this is what could have felt like for me.
It's sad at the same time when you think that, you know, there is something that we're deprived of, you know, it's been taken away from us. You know, it's our country, and like, and for you to see someone who's born in Australia who is still so connected and wanna experience that, you know, and I'm sure that there is thousands and thousands of people like you who don't have this opportunity, who really want to go and experience it. You mentioned your partner, so you've married someone outside Afghan community. How was that experience?
That's how you would imagine it to be, the way it started out. It's obviously not easy marrying outside of your culture. I think even within like Afghan and the different ethnicities that exist, that's hard in itself. And for me to go even beyond that, it's interesting. I think like I said, with how my siblings are and how they can sort of advocate for me to my parents about certain things, they really helped me get through that in ways that they probably don't even know. But I'm lucky also that they've also married people that aren't Afghan. So that definitely helped.
So they
opened the doors. But again, because of the age difference, my parents are re-triggered about what's going on.
Who was the hardest to convince?
I think my mum.
Your mum, right?
Yeah, my mum. It was very difficult, but then they got to know him and for like who he is, and went from something really extreme to we're now traveling around together in Uzbekistan, like having kebab and mantou together. And it's just the difference in how they accept him as one of their own.
It's family
amazing.
now.
It's family now, and
beautiful.
I can't imagine it any other way. So. I think culturally it's hard as well though to go through a marriage where your partner isn't the same culture as you. It's not easy to keep connected to your culture because at home with him I don't speak Farsi, I have to speak English.
What's his language? First, or his parents' first language? What's
Hindi.
That? Hindi. Okay.
From Fiji. So.
Do they have another language in Fiji as well outside the Hindi? The Fijian one?
Like Fijian language, and then there's Hindi as well because it's a big population.
So he would be trilingual, is he? Or is he?
No, he doesn't speak Fijian, he speaks Hindi.
Do you speak any Hindi? No?
No. But it's interesting because like I said, like it's hard to keep connected to your culture. It's a real conscious effort to keep practicing it. And how I'm going to do that is just, I have to be really mindful of how I do it and what I do. And I have to respect his side of that as well, you know, it's not just one-sided. And through like the past few years, we've just realized there's so many similarities in like even our language, there's similar words that we have and similar like cultural practices that we have and so on. So it's interesting that you can find the similarities in perhaps countries that you think wouldn't have any.
It's amazing. I think with Hindi, it's also it's influenced massively by Farsi. You know, with you know conquests that happened back in history.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of crossover. And I think the languages have evolved. Like you said, when I speak Hindi and I've pretty much self-taught myself. And, and that's because it's so similar. Like a lot of the words, when you pay attention, it's the same way. Yeah. Especially Urdu is very, very similar to Farsi.
Yeah.
And even Hindi as well to a huge extent. Cool. Your wedding was like a reflection of the mixed culture. It's beautiful to see the photos. Like, you guys had the henna night, was the Afghan way, and then the haldi. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I know that you do you've done a lot of work in the multicultural space. Do you think like you being Afghan and you coming from that, that background, is that where your interest in multicultural work kind of started, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've always been interested in that sort of social justice advocacy space, but I never really knew it or had the words for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay.
I think if I can just bring it back a step and just think about my parents opening their own small business to settle here and just to make an income, that would have taken a lot at the time. And I don't even think they knew it, but they were doing advocacy in their own way. And what I've realised throughout my professional journey is that advocacy can be done in different ways. It's not just one where you're out public speaking or whatever. It's people on the ground, like my parents, that opened a business, and the way the advocacy was to the locals who wouldn't have really had a great image of what Afghanistan is. So they're doing this representation thing, but then they're also hiring people from the Afghan community to work with them and to provide that local income and employment as well. So I think I remember like I would be behind the counter as my parents would work, and I just have my own little toy cashier pretending I'm doing something as well. So I think absorbing everything that they put into our family and what they did for us and the local community was huge. And then growing up and going to uni, I always knew I had an interest in sort of international development or multiculturalism.
And you studied international relations development.
So I think, that's what sort of pushed me to go in that direction. Obviously I wasn't conscious of it at the time. It's just something I just did and knew I was interested in. And then, eventually made my way through like sort of youth work and like working with multicultural young people and refugees and migrants. And I think growing up, just seeing the systems they had in place for the Afghan community and the different services and things that were available, I think that's something that was like, I want to work with refugees and migrants as well. So it sort of led me into the multiculturalism space.
And is that where you see yourself kind of, working in the future as well?
I think so. I definitely think it'll always be there. It'll always be something I'm passionate about, because that sense of belonging, like everyone deserves that, and what we can do to be part of that or how we can advocate for that, I think is really important. No matter if you're born here or not, if you've experienced it or not. I think Australia loves to say it's a multicultural country and it really promotes that, but on the ground, like, are people actually feeling that? Do they have that sense of belonging or not? And like you said, it's really complicated because people go through that trauma not just in their home country, but they've got so much trauma that happens here because of different reasons like racism. So I think in the future I will be, or it'll always be there. I have no choice. You know?
And it's such an important representation as well with people, with your background of, having been born here and in our community there is that sense of, if you're raised here, you're too Australian, too Australian, so that kind of image at home within your community, and then when you go out in the wider Australian society, there is still racism. There is still people who still look at you differently because you're not necessarily white or whatever, and or how the further away you are from white, the less Australian sometimes you're looked upon, and that is a confusing space to be in for children and young people in general, where you don't know which one are you, and it's linked to the sense of identity stuff that we spoke about earlier. So I think it's important for people like you to be represented and to actually be in the especially as our community is growing here in Australia, to be more awareness, I guess. So, no,
it's interesting because even in the community or even my parents or my siblings, they don't even know what I actually do. You know, they're like,
okay. They question you about it, like, according to that.
And like, what is advocacy in Farsi? I don't even know the word for it, you know, and what is, it's really hard to explain that. And
Dadkhahi is what they say.
Is it? Yeah. Okay, well, there you go. My parents will learn. They'll finally understand what I do. But it's really hard to portray what you do. I don't know.
And to explain as well, you do advocacy, but what do you do?
Yeah, but what do you do? Exactly. So I think that's hard, but I obviously any job can be hard to explain.
Yeah.
But I'll always carry what I've learned into the work that I do. And I don't want to speak on behalf of people that weren't born here and what they've gone through, but I definitely carry, those things that they've taught me.
Yeah.
And that I've been privileged enough to hear their stories and what they go through,
Yeah. And on top of that, there is a lot of those that are, born here.
Yeah.
And it's like that needs to be represented as well. Like, it's not necessarily just those that have migrated here that they're going through these problems. It's essentially. We can't forget about those not just Afghan, generally multicultural community, the kids or children that are born here and what their experience is as well. I think so interesting. What I think what I'm really looking forward to in this trip that I'm going in is Central Asia. So you've done like 4 weeks around there. You mentioned before Uzbekistan, Bukhara. I've got that on the list. Where was the other place?
Khiva.
Yeah. Khiva. And they speak Tajiki there as well? Or?
Khiva, no. In Bukhara they did, and there's another, Samarkand. They speak.
Yeah. Did you go Samarkand?
I did go Samarkand as well.
Yeah.
I feel like Samarkand was a little bit overhyped from my experience. So I'll be interested to hear what you say. But Khiva was definitely one of the top. And
the
Bukhara.
history is just amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was just mind blown. There's so much that I learnt and the influence that Central Asia has had on history, on mathematics, on astrology, on everything that they don't really get acknowledged for.
It's not recognized.
No.
Yeah, it's forgotten history. There is, related to that topic, a book that I highly recommend if you haven't already read is The Lost Enlightenment.
Oh, okay, I haven't.
And those that are hearing or listening or watching us as well, it's a must-read book, especially for if you are from Central Asia or have any kind of link to that region. It goes through. It talks about the evolution of Islam until the Emperor Timur. In English they call him Timurlen. We're actually descendant from Timur, like our tribe. We're Timuri. So that's why it's so interesting for me as well. And to talk about, so this book essentially talks about the enlightenment that is now lost. Literally the people that came up with so much scientific stuff, like from astronomy to mathematics, and the flag bearer of all that, really, and how that's never even spoken about,
And it's really unfortunate because even when we do speak about it, like poets like Rumi, who is actually Jalaluddin, he's when that stuff is represented, I feel like it's
from Rome. Like, why is he called Rumi?
It just becomes westernized, and even the translations that I've forgotten the famous translator that's done Rumi's work. It's so twisted into this Western white gaze. It's like sexualized and all this stuff, but it's so religious and sacred, and it's just completely changed. And that really annoys me. It's even when it is acknowledged, it's not an authentic representation.
Yeah, that's so true. And Rumi is not the only one. Like all these poets from that region, it's almost like their work is being stolen in a way, right? You know, and it's the same with mathematics. Like you speak to an average scientist or you listen to an average scientist and they never recognize the fact that all this was actually something we learned from this region.
Yeah.
The list of, you know, the list of what you could do is recognize it.
Exactly.
You know? Cool. I'm so looking forward to it.
It'll be great. Yeah.
Hopefully I'm going to be able to see how I go, but hopefully I'm going to be able to like maybe do a bit of a vlog as well.
I can't wait. I'm going to be looking out for that.
And we can maybe do this again, you know, when I'm back.
I would love that. Yeah.
We can talk about our experiences.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much for you know, coming on the pod/interview, whatever you want to call it. The qissa.
The qissa. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get together again in the future. Any other last message? Any other thing you want to mention to the Afghan community out there that's watching us, listening to us?
Oh my God, what can I say? Now I'm on the spot. No, just never, I guess for people like me that were born here and haven't had the opportunity to go back to Afghanistan, but yeah, you'll never put yourself in a box, I guess. Always be who you are, connect the way you want. Yeah. For example, like I didn't know how to read Farsi, and I chose to take up Farsi classes in an American time zone because I haven't found one here. So like, you always connect to your culture in ways that, you know, that you want to, and I'm finally able, being like slowly reading Farsi now. It's, you know, that just adds that connection, and you know, it goes really deep and beyond that. So connect in the ways that you want to your culture and never let anyone tell you who you are. You get to decide that. That's beautiful. That's such an important message for you know, even I think about like my own nieces and nephews. I'm at home and they hardly speak Farsi nowadays, and I tend to like tell them, look, you're gonna regret this. Trust me. I know. Now they have the opportunity to talk. And it's even more complicated for them because in my family, where they've married outside of Afghans as well, and they're now part of 3 different cultures. I can't even imagine what they're going to go through and how they're going to connect to the different cultures they're part of. So it gets more complicated. Absolutely, yes. So you speak Farsi at home? Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Martika. Thank you, Hashmat. Cheers. All right. Awesome. That was great. Was it? Yeah, I loved it. Good. I loved it. That went so much quicker than I thought. Oh, it's about maybe 40-ish. Okay, yeah. 40-ish, 1 hour. Wow, that was so quick. Yeah, it went quick. Yeah, so that means we enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.